is honoring to you and instructional to all of us, Lord. And thank you for everything you do for us. In your name I pray. Amen. So I was telling a group in the back that I taught junior church today with my wife, and we were trying to figure out what to do junior church on. And I knew I was teaching tonight, and I already had an idea of what I wanted to do for tonight, and it's in the book of Daniel, so you guys can turn to Daniel 3 if you want to get started there. So I said, there's a lot of good stories in Daniel. Let's just keep it consistent. So we did Daniel in the lion's den with the kids downstairs. Now, Sam, for Halloween, had gotten a costume of a lion because he wanted to be the cowardly lion from, Wizard of Oz. Yes, I always think Somewhere Over the Rainbow, but that's not the name of the movie. The Wizard of Oz. And so he has this lion costume, and so we pulled him out while I was talking to the kids, and I started asking the kids to guess what the story was going to be that we were going to do. And I said, well, I've got somebody who's going to help us figure out what the story is. And then we had Sam come in his lion's costume. And I laughed with Beth, and I said, should we have somebody dress up and come in tonight? And she didn't like that idea, especially since I suggested me or her do it, and she didn't like that at all. So we'll keep the costumes. I was telling Tom, I think if Dave Schmuck dresses up in character for the kids and does that, we'll let Dave do the dressing up for the teaching, and I think he does that a little better than I probably would. But we're going to go to Daniel 3. And this is a really familiar story. If you grew up in church at all, Daniel and the fiery furnace, it's not really a story about Daniel. It's in the book of Daniel, but it's a story about his three friends. And, I'm kind of conflicted when it comes to his three friends. Anybody know what his three friends' names are? Shadrach, Meshach, and Abednego. But are those really their names? No, those are their Babylonian given names, right? And in Daniel's Babylonian given name is Belteshazzar, but we call him Daniel all throughout the book of Daniel and through the stories. But we call Shadrach, Meshach, and Abednego, and so I was asking my kids on the way here, why do you think we do that? And Ella said, well, Shadrach, Meshach, and Abednego just go together. They just kind of go off your tongue. And I think she might have a point. What I really think it is most of the time when they're brought up in Daniel, it's mostly the Babylonians talking about them, and so they're talking about them in their Babylonian names. But their names are Hananiah, Mishael, and Azariah. So I'll probably go back and forth because I grew up just like everyone else calling them Shadrach, Meshach, and Abednego. But I don't think it's really fair to them to call them that. I think we should try to call them. And Max and Sam were telling me that Mr. Mark always does that too. He calls them by Hananiah, Mishael, and Azariah. So I'll try to do that as much as I can. But this story is more about them. We see in the first chapter of Daniel, the Israelites are captured by the Babylonians because God promised because of their sin they were going to be taken into captivity. They're taken into captivity, and the Babylonians bring them from Israel, from Jerusalem, and bring them all the way to Babylon. And then the king Nebuchadnezzar takes the choicest of men, the smartest, the wisest, the choicest of men. And when I say men, we're talking about teenagers and kids in their teenage years and in their early 20s, young men. And he gives them 3 years where he basically gives them a crash course in Babylonian culture. They have to eat his food from his table. They have to drink his wine. They have to learn all the customs and culture. They're given, it's testing. Grant's got 2 friends that he played basketball with for the last 3 years. In this year, they both took scholarships to go to this special school in, I think it's around Cleveland, Ohio, called Spire Academy, and it's a sports school, and they're playing basketball there. And all they do is basketball. So they get up in the morning, and they have a workout in the morning. And then after the workout, they go together and they go eat breakfast together. And then after that, they do more basketball stuff. And then after that, they go to classes. And then after that, they go work out some more. And then until they go to bed. And then they go to bed, and then they get up and they do it all over again. This is basically what these young Israelite boys were doing, was getting accustomed to this. And the goal was, Nebuchadnezzar wanted, and it wasn't just kids from Israel, it was from all over the land, because at that time, the Babylonians were the rulers of almost the whole known world. And so they have these guys in here, and for 3 years they have like this intense time when they do this. And we know that the first story in Daniel is about what? What does Daniel and his 3 friends do? Led by Daniel, what decision do they make? Not to eat the king's meat, right? They're going to eat pulse. So the word is in here. Translated vegetables, maybe fruits, hopefully for their kids' sake, fruits, because I'm not a big vegetable guy. And then water, they're going to drink water. And they took a stand right there. And then later, and then in Daniel 3, it's the fiery furnace. And then later in Daniel's life, what we talked about with the junior age kids is the lion's den, right? And that's Daniel taking a stand in his old age with the new king, Darius. So through all of this, we're going to kind of go through this. We're going to go through some historical context that I thought was pretty cool, just because I heard this all my life, but this is interesting to see it in the light of modern day. And then we're going to go through kind of the story itself. But really, the thing that's going to be most important, we're going to bring 3 things out of it that I got out of this story, that I've gotten over the years, and what I've got out of studying it for this. 3 things that I think are practical for any age group, for us in this room, for the teens, for the kids downstairs, practical application. So Babylon was located in modern day Iraq. So I was looking at a map of Iraq, and then I found the ruins of Babylon, so I was able to see exactly where it's at. And if you take Baghdad, you know, we just had some wars over the last year, so we're familiar with that area. We're familiar definitely with Baghdad. If you take Baghdad, Babylon that we're talking about is 60 miles almost straight south. If you look at it on a map, the ruins, there's a road that goes from Babylon straight south down, and you can almost stay right on that road. Now, when I Google Maps it had me go around, so there must be some stuff going on with that road. It must not be the easiest road to get through, but it's straight, I mean, it's dead south of Baghdad, 60 miles, which I thought was kind of cool. It's like, helps you put in perspective, you know, it's not just a story in the Bible. I mean, you can see it. You can zoom down on Google Earth and see the ruins and see where Babylon was. This happened probably sometime between 500 and 600 BC, so many hundreds of years before Jesus came back. We talked about King Nebuchadnezzar. He had exiled the young Israelites, including Daniel, Hananiah, Mishael, and Azariah in their late teens, early 20s. And as part of this story, he had erected this golden statue that was 150 feet tall. So 150 feet tall, I don't know how many of you watched football when you went home. I did. But it's half a football field, right? If you're not a football fan, it's like 3 semi-trucks in a line together. That's how tall this thing is. And it's straight up in the air. It's this golden statue. It's something that was pretty impressive to see in that time with the materials and with the machinery that they had. And so Nebuchadnezzar had erected this idol, and it says that it was in the plain of, Dura, the plain of Dura. And from the best that I could tell from my study, the plain of Dura is probably about 3 to 6 miles south and east of the city of Babylon. So again, about 60 miles south of Baghdad, and it's right off the banks of the Euphrates River. And they think that they found the base of what could have been the base of this idol that they had created, but that's where they think that this was. And it was in a plain, so it was wide open. And what they did was they brought all of the, I'm going to read it to you, prominent princes, governors, captains, judges, treasurers, counselors, sheriffs, and all the rulers of the provinces. So it wasn't all the people of the land, it was all the dignitaries, it was all the important people they brought to this plain because he was having this idol, this 150-foot golden monstrosity, he was having it dedicated, and this was a kind of I'm presenting it to the world type thing. And from here on out, this is going to be like my Egyptian pyramid or whatever else. It was just basically, he was a very vain person based on the rest of the book of Daniel. And this was just a way for everybody to look at him and how powerful he was. So it's in the plain of Dura. It's close to the city of Babylon. He has all the prominent people in the land at that time in Babylon out there. They're all sitting together. He's probably sitting up in his own area up high. And he puts out instruction to them, as most of you probably know for this story, that when the music plays, and he has this massive orchestra of different instruments, when the music plays, when you hear the music plays, I want you all to get down, bow down, and I want you to worship this golden statue that I've made. And that's where we're at. And Hananiah, Mishael, and Azrael have a choice in that moment of what they need to do. Because just like you saw in chapter 1, when they were faced with eating the king's meat, right? They weren't the only Israelites that were forced to eat the king's meat, because there was more Israelites than just Daniel and his 3 friends. And it says that everyone was eating them except for them, right? Same thing in here. I read this passage to make sure that I wasn't just doing preacher speak and, it says that literally everyone bowed down. And then it said that there were some rulers, some princes that came to the king, basically ratted him out and told on him and said, there's 3 Israelites that aren't bowing down and aren't worshiping your idol. And what did it say in the passage? Let's read that passage, just that part of it. I'm not an Apple person, but I got this iPad for free when I renewed my Comcast subscription. Comcast, don't get me started on that. But they threw in this free iPad and lowered my bill. So I have this, and it's real nice, but I'm trying to figure this out. So hopefully I can switch back and forth because my eyes are getting bad, and I'm having a hard time reading on my phone. Kids are going to laugh at me for that one. So go down to verse 12. This is where the tattletaling is happening. And it says, there are certain Jews whom thou hast set over the affairs of the provinces of Babylon. So Hananiah, Mishael, Azariah, they're actually somewhat important people, but they have to be invited to this dedication of this idol. There are certain Jews whom thou hast set over the affairs of the province of Babylon, Shadrach, Meshach, and Abednego. These men, O king, have not regarded thee. They serve not thy gods, nor worship the golden image which thou hast set up. And Nebuchadnezzar, in his rage and fury, commanded to bring Shadrach, Meshach, and Abednego. Now, I'm going to stop right there. He's upset. He's not just in rage. It's rage and fury, right? He's upset. As we read on, I think he's upset because he knows these guys. He knows they're friends of Daniel, which I think he knows, likes, and respects Daniel. And I think Daniel probably isn't there because he knows that Daniel's not going to do it, and he doesn't want Daniel killed. I've heard this said over the years, and I firmly believe that that's what it is. He's off on business in a faraway land and conveniently couldn't be there for Nebuchadnezzar. But Nebuchadnezzar forgot about his 3 friends who were part of the whole other part of this. And I think he likes them, and he's frustrated with them for doing this to him. Because he's already said, if you don't do this within the hour, it says earlier in the chapter, you'll be in the fiery furnace. So in his rage and in his fury, Is it true, O Shadrach, Meshach, and Abednego, do you not serve my gods nor worship the golden image which I've set up? Now if you be ready, that at which time you hear the sound of the, and he goes through all the instruments, you fall down and worship the idol which I have made. Well, but if you worship not, you'll be cast in the same hour. So, and again, I'm reading between the lines because, I wasn't there, but I kind of think he said, if you be ready, like maybe you weren't ready, maybe you didn't understand the instructions, I'm going to give you a second chance, because there were no second chances promised earlier in the chapter, but he's giving them a second chance right here. I'm going to let you do it. We'll do it private over here where people, your other Israelite friends won't see you do it. You can save face. Let's just do this, get it over with, worship my gods, and let's move on with life. And this is the part that I like the most. If you go down to verse 16, it says that Shadrach, Meshach, and Abednego answered and said to the king, O Nebuchadnezzar, we are not careful to answer thee in this matter. If it be so, our God, whom we serve, is able to deliver us from the burning fiery furnace, and he will deliver us out of thy hand, O king. But if not, be it known unto thee, O king, that we will not serve thy gods, nor worship the golden image which thou hast set up. What this passage is saying is, and sometimes in this translation it can be a little confusing, but I've looked at the commentaries. What he's saying is, our God is powerful enough to deliver us. But if he chooses not to, that's okay with us. We're okay with that. There's no scenario where we're serving your God or worshiping your idol. And he says that, and they're very direct about it. When they say, we're not careful to answer this. What they're saying is, there's no hesitation. We weren't confused. This is how it is. And you'll see from Nebuchadnezzar's response how much he liked that. Then was Nebuchadnezzar full of fury, because this time I don't think it was irritation. You could see this. He was full of fury, and the form of his visage was changed. Basically, have you ever had, I have my kids, they'll come to me, they'll do something, it's like, I'll get on them, they'll do it again. But at some point as a parent, your irritation with them changes to real frustration, right? Your tone changes with them. I know as a dad, sometimes you speak to them, and whereas they were not listening to you before, all of a sudden they're listening. This is what happened with the king. Like, his whole countenance, everything, his attitude, everything changes, and he was mad. And he went into full fury, and he commanded that they should heat the furnace 7 times more. He commanded that the most mighty men that were in his army bind Shadrach, Meshach, and Abednego, and to cast them into the fiery furnace. And these men were bound in their coats, their hosen, and their hats, and other garments, and were cast in the middle of the burning fiery furnace. Therefore, because the king's commandment was urgent, the furnace was exceedingly hot. The flame of the fire slew the men that took up Shadrach. So this furnace is so hot because he's so mad. And they were doing this all so fast. He got his strongest warriors from his army. They bring him up to the fire, and because it's so hot, as they're throwing him in, the heat from the flames kills them, literally kills them. It's probably it's the breathing in of the, that's usually what gets people in a house fire or something, is breathing the smoke. Whatever it is, these guys were gone. So now he's lost 3 of his favorite rulers of his land. He's lost some of his strongest, mightiest men. And what does it say happened? And King Nebuchadnezzar was astonished and rose up in haste and spake unto his counselors and said, did we not cast 3 men bound in the midst of the fire? And they answered and said to the king, true, O king. And he answered and said, lo, I see 4 men loose, walking in the midst of the fire, and they have no hurt. And the form of the 4th is like the Son of God. Let's stop right there really quickly. I've heard Pastor preach this before, and it was part of a larger message where he talks about making a case for the fact that Jesus Christ, the physical form of God, who appeared in the New Testament as a baby, lived for 33 years and then died on the cross, came throughout the Old Testament and appeared before people. And he spoke, one of those times he spoke about was right here in the burning in the fiery furnace, that this was actually Jesus Christ. It was God in physical form came down and met with these three men who were bold enough to stand up to this king of Babylon who ruled basically the whole known world at that time. And most likely when Nebuchadnezzar says, like unto the Son of God, he's talking about like an angel or whatever his form of deity is. He knows that there's something different about this fourth person. And he's probably making an assumption about that. So then Nebuchadnezzar came near to the mouth of the burning fiery furnace. And let's stop. The burning fiery furnace back then, it's probably a massive kiln where they fired bricks to make bricks for their buildings. From what I could read, this country and this group of people, they would make these massive kilns like into the side of a hill, and the top would be open, obviously, for the smoke and the flame to come out, but the side would also be open, kind of like a pizza oven, so you could slide the bricks in and get them out. But this is on a much larger scale than a pizza oven. And so what they probably did is they threw the men in from the top down in there, and this is why Nebuchadnezzar could see inside of it and see what was going on in there. So he now gets close enough that he can, so he can yell in there, and he says, "Come on out." And so Hananiah, Mishael, Azariah come walking out. As they walk out, it says that all the princes and rulers start gathering around him because they're amazed. And what they notice about him, and what the Bible says that they notice about him right away, is that none of their clothes are singed. Not a hair on their head is singed. They don't smell like smoke. The teens, they were at a campfire right at your property. When they came home, my kids smelled like the campfire, right? You can't get away from it. They didn't even smell like the fire. And the only thing that had burned were the bindings that bound them up. And so they're amazed. And so let's go down to verse 28. Then Nebuchadnezzar spake and said, Blessed be the God of Shadrach, Meshach, and Abednego, who hath sent his angel and delivered his servant that trusted in him, and have changed the king's word and yielded their bodies that they might not serve or worship any god except their own God. Therefore I make a decree that every people, nation, and language which speak anything amiss against the God of Shadrach, Meshach, and Abednego shall be cut into pieces, and their houses shall be made a dunghill, because there is no other God that can deliver after this sort. The king then promoted Shadrach, Meshach, and Abednego in the province of Babylon. That's kind of the cherry on top. Here is the most important ruler of the known world recognizing that this God of Shadrach, Meshach, and Abednego is a living God that when he prays to his gods, that's just it. He doesn't get much back. These guys prayed to their God, and then there was a very tangible result that came of it. This God was a powerful God, and they recognized it. So, again, this is a story that I think we all have heard. We all understand it. We all understand the power of it. But here are my 3 takeaways from it. The first one is godly leadership breeds courage. We saw in chapter 1 that Daniel was kind of the ringleader of this group of 4, right? And he stood up and said, he purposed in his heart. Let's go to Daniel chapter 1 in verse 8. Is anyone willing, so I don't have to switch there, to read that verse real loud? Go ahead.
But Daniel purposed in his heart that he would not defile himself with the portion of the king's meat, nor with the wine which he drank. Therefore he requested of the prince of the eunuchs that he might not defile himself.
Daniel purposed in his heart, right? He made a decision, and he wasn't deviating from it. He purposed in his heart that he was not going to go against what the Lord wanted him to do. Who was with him when he purposed in his heart, and who joined along with him? Shadrach, Meshach, and Abednego. That leadership then led them to make a stand in their own right. They didn't have Daniel there to stand for them and to make that declaration. Now they were the leaders, right? Godly leadership, I don't care if you're a leader of a family, a father, a mother. I don't care if you're a leader of a church. Pastor Matt, I don't care if you're a leader at work, godly leadership, moral leadership breeds the same type of response. We should all strive in whatever leadership role that we are in, we should strive to be leaders that use God's instruction, use the Bible and moral characters as the rule for our decision making. There are decisions that are out there that are really tough, and this goes right into my second point, courage is built through practice. Through the small things, small decisions that you make right lead into large decisions that make right. A small decision to eat vegetables instead of pork led to a decision where they were facing their death at being thrown into a fiery furnace that was very real and very much right in front of their face. I'm sure the decision to eat vegetables as they were in this new land, this evil Babylonian, probably very immoral culture, I'm sure those were not the only things that they had to decide to do and to not defile their character and go against their morals. So courage is built through practice. Moral and ethical and godly behavior is built through practice. You can say to yourself, as you're young or old, you can say to yourself, you know what? I'm here with a bunch of work people. Nobody's ever going to know. I don't want to ruffle feathers. I'm just going to go along with whatever it is. I'm speaking to myself here. You can say, you know what? I'm here. The instruction says to do this, but it's stupid. It's a bad rule. No one's going to know. It makes more sense to do the other thing. I'm just going to do this. You can do this in these little things in your life, right? I'm going to really speak to myself. You can say, oh, I'm gonna drive a certain way, or I'm gonna do this a certain way. And there's these little things in your lives. But if you make the decisions to do things right in the little things, you decide to get up for church when you're young, when you don't want to. You decide to do this, you decide to do that. Those doing things in the little things makes it easier to make the right decision when the big real decisions happen, the ones that matter. So do the right in the little things because it leads to doing right in the big things. And then my the third point that comes out of this message is faith isn't outcome dependent. We saw this in earlier when, let me go to it. I think it's in verse 17. I can find it. Verse 16, about the end of the verse. O Nebuchadnezzar, we are not careful to answer thee in this matter. If our God, whom we serve, is able to deliver us from the burning fiery furnace, and he will deliver us out of thy hand, but if not, be it known unto thee, O king, that we will not serve your God. We know God can. We don't know that he will in this situation, but it doesn't matter. Their faith wasn't outcome dependent. It's really easy to make the right decision when you know that the right decision is going to lead to someone praising you. The right decision is going to lead to financial or some sort of material gain, right? It's real easy to make the right decision when things are going to go well. You're going to be praised. It's not so easy to make the right decision when you're going to be embarrassed in front of your peers, when your peer pressure is going to really weigh down on you, when there's potential, in their case, physical harm come to them. I mean, we live in America where we're not really persecuted like Christians in a lot of generations and areas. There's Christians right now across the world that are being persecuted in a way that we can't even imagine. And we don't have to deal with that side of it. But every day we're faced with, how do I participate in this conversation at work? How do I do this? How do I do that? And out of my own inconvenience, maybe I should just go along with it, right? Out of my own not wanting to be, ruffle feathers, maybe I should go along with this. Our faith should not be outcome dependent. And I don't care at what point in your life you are. I know that there are things that happen. I coach soccer for my 2 younger boys, and it's a upward, so you do a little challenge every practice. And one of the questions they asked was, what is a situation where God protected you when you might not have known it, right? And you think of, I went to college out of state my whole time at college. My wife's from Illinois. I've done a lot of driving on the interstate over my adult life. And there are so many times that there's at least a couple of times specifically I can remember wanting to leave my in-laws' house, and it never happens because my wife and my mother-in-law, they talk too much, and I never get out when I want to get out. And I get really frustrated, and packing always becomes a thing because we have 5 kids, and it's like playing Tetris in the back. And it's always, we never leave when I want to leave. I don't care when I start the process. I can wake up at 5 in the morning and try and start. We never leave when I want to leave. And I get so annoyed. And I rage a little bit, and everybody gets frustrated with me, but it never happens. And there have been times when I'm like, this makes no sense. We should have left. And then we'll get down the road, and somewhere along the road will be this major accident. And I'll be thinking, we could have been right in the middle of that. I don't know. And over my life, as I've gotten older, I've learned that, you know what? When you hear everything happens for a reason, and God's always in charge, and God has, is in control of everything, you learn that unexpected deaths, which are really upsetting, especially in the moment, injuries, medical problems, all these things that come up in our lives and are a massive either inconvenience or just devastating emotionally and physically for us. And we think, do we stop and think about it from God's perspective? This might be affecting us in a way where it's stopping me from doing something that I shouldn't be doing, or it's protecting one of my family members. It's doing this, it's doing that. We don't know, because guess what? Our faith shouldn't be outcome dependent. Our faith is there because our God is good all the time, no matter what, even though that statement is easy to say but hard to understand in a lot of ways. I'm not one that understands it. There are times when things happen. I can remember very specifically in my family, a very difficult thing happened in one of my cousins who's a believer in his life, and a child passed away in an accident that was absolutely the fault of somebody who was under the influence of a substance, and it was just awful. And it was so hard to understand. And it's still, I don't understand why that happened. But God is good all the time, and I don't know, we'll never know in some of these situations until we get to heaven how that played out for eternity. But it is. We have to rest in the fact that we have faith and that we trust in God, and it's not outcome dependent. So those 3 things. Godly leadership breeds godly leaders. Courage and faith happen with practice in the little things. And then our faith is not outcome dependent. I think this is something that Daniel, the book of Daniel, shows us in a very real way. I mean, because later in the book is Daniel in the lion's den, and it's almost a mirror of the fiery furnace, except this time now it's Daniel, and it's a different king. But basically, Daniel is put in a position where he's got to make a choice that could put him to death. He has people telling on him. He's got a king whose hand is forced, and God protects him. It's almost like deja vu. But all through the book of Daniel, all we see is how we can live our lives being godly leaders, how godly leaders breed godly responses, how courage is built through small decisions, correct decision, and how our faith is not dependent on the outcome. In this passage in Daniel, the outcome was almost always favorable for Daniel and his 3 friends. But even if it wasn't, God was still the same God, right? And they knew that. And that's the whole point of this passage is be like Daniel, be like Hananiah, be like Mishael, be like Azariah. And if we can grab a hold of that, even in a small way, I think that we can be better people for the people around us and for ourselves and for eternity. Let's pray, and then we can be dismissed. Dear Lord, thank you for this day, Lord. Thank you for the book of Daniel, Lord. Thank you for Daniel and his 3 friends and the testimony and the witness that they were in a situation where they were away from home, away from everything that they knew, young men who didn't have anyone to set an example for them, but yet they chose to trust you and to have faith in you no matter what the outcome was, Lord. Help us in our lives to grab a hold of that, Lord. Help us to exercise that in our lives, Lord. Help us to start in the little things, honoring you in the little things, Lord, and help us when the big things come, help us to honor you and make the right decision no matter what the outcome is, our faith not being dependent on the outcome. Thank you for everything you do for us. Give us safety on our drive home. In your name I pray. Amen.